All right, this is Ender, the voice and the face behind Philosophy by Choice. And today we're going to be reading Guy Dubord's Society of the Spectacle, published in 1970. We're going to start with chapter 2, The Commodity as a Spectacle. Okay. What are you trying to hit? Oh, no. Okay. So let's start. For it is only as a universal category of total social being that the commodity can be understood in its authentic essence. It is only in this context that reification, which arises from the commodity relation, acquires a decisive meaning, as much for the objective evaluation of society as for the attitude of men towards it. For the submission of their consciousness to the forms which the reification is expressed, this submission also grows because of the fact that the more the rationalization and mechanizations of the work process increases, the more the activity of the worker loses its character as activity becomes a contemplative attitude. This is by Lukács, History and Class Consciousness. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Can I what? Yeah. All right. Get out at the steps, okay? In the essential movement of the spectacle, which consists of taking up within itself all that existed in human activity in a fluid state, in order to possess it in a coagulate state, as things which have become the exclusive value by their formulation in negative of lived value. You'll have to, yeah, your whole body. Okay, let's just start that again. Okay, in the essential movement of the spectacle, which consists of taking up within itself all that existed in human activity in a fluid state in order to possess it in a coagulated state, as things which have become the exclusive value by their formulation in negative of lived value, we recognize our old enemy, the commodity, who knows so well how to seem, at first glance, something trivial and obvious, while, on the contrary, it is so complex and so full of metaphysical subtleties.
I'm not cold at all.
Good. Subtleties. Okay. This is the principle of commodity fetishism, the domination of society by intangible as well as tangible things, which reaches its absolute fulfillment in the spectacle, where the tangible world is replaced by a selection of images which exists above it and which at the same time are recognized as the tangible par excellence. Shush. The world at once present and absent, which is the spectacle, makes visible, is the world of the commodity dominating all that is lived. And the world of the commodity is thus shown as it is, because its movement is identical to the estrangement of men among themselves and vis-a-vis their global product. The loss of quality, so evident at all levels of spectacular language, of the objects it praises and the behavior it regulates, merely translates the fundamental traits of the real production which brushes reality aside. The commodity form is through and through equal to itself, the category of the quantitative. It is the quantitative which the commodity form develops, and it can only develop within the quantitative. This development, which excludes the qualitative, is, as development itself, subject to a passage into the qualitative. The spectacle signifies that it has crossed the threshold of its own abundance. This is as yet true only locally at some points, but is already true on the universal scale, which is the original context of the commodity, a context which is practical movement encompassing the earth as a world market verified. The development of productive forces has been the real unconscious history which built and modified the conditions of existence of human groups as conditions of survival and extended these conditions as the economic basis of all their enterprises. Within a natural economy, the commodities sector represented a surplus of survival. The production of commodities, which implies the exchange of varied products among independent producers, could for a long time remain craft production, contained within a marginal economic function where its quantitative truth was still masked. However, when commodity production met the social conditions of large-scale commerce and of the accumulation of social conditions of a large-scale commerce and of the accumulation of capitals. However, when commodity production met the social conditions of large-scale commerce and the accumulation of capitals, it seized the tonal domination of the economy. The entire economy then became what the commodity had shown itself to be during the course of this conquest, a process of quantitative development. This incessant deployment of economic power in the form of commodity, which transformed human labor into commodity labor, into wage labor, cumulatively led to an abundance in which the primary question of survival is undoubtedly resolved, but in such a way that it is constantly rediscovered. It is posed over again each time at a higher level. Economic growth frees societies from the natural pressure which demanded their direct struggle for survival, but at that point, it is from their liberator that they are not liberated. The independence of the commodity was extended to the entire economy over which it rules. The economy transforms the world, but transforms it only into a world of economy. The pseudo-nature within which human labor is alienated demands that it be served ad infinitum, and this service, being judged and absolved only by itself, in fact, acquires the totality of socially permissible efforts and projects as its servants. The abundance of commodities, that is, the commodity relation, can be no more than augmented survival. The domination of the commodity was at first exerted over the economy in an obscure manner. The economy itself, the material basis of social life, remained unperceived and not understood, like the familiar which remains unknown. In a society where the concrete commodity is rare or unusual, it is the apparent domination of money which presents itself as an emissary armed with full powers which speaks in the name of an unknown force. With the Industrial Revolution, the division of labor in manufactures and mass production for the world market, the commodity appears, in fact, as a power which comes really to occupy social life. It is then that political economy takes shape as the dominant science and as the science of domination. The spectacle is the moment when the commodity has attained the total occupation of social life. The relation to the commodity is not only visible, but one no longer sees anything but it. The world one sees is the world. Okay, so it seems like Guy Debord is kind of following very closely with Karl Marx's explanation in Das Kapital of what he thinks of as human essence, or the human spirit at the beginning, which is closely connected to toiling in the earth to produce the material goods and needs of existence and family life. And then the Industrial Revolution happens and there's mass production. What Marx doesn't really get into is, so he talks about the infrastructure, which is kind of industry and division of labor and factories, all that stuff. But he doesn't really get into the superstructure. The superstructure is kind of the monetary valuing of commodities or products of mass production, um, with this layer of socially imbued value that has nothing to do with the actual material itself. And he kind of like leaves that vague, but it seems like Guy Dubord and probably other members of the Frankfurt School from this time period kind of latched onto that and expounded upon it. So just have that in mind, that um, it's still the same basis as Marxist philosophy on material life and mass production, economic production, but they're kind of imbuing it with social meaning and how that commodity form and the social value it carries um, almost now has like flipped it on its head, where now it dominates individual human value through its web of value and meaning that it now dominates over humans. So it's kind of like the direction they're coming from, where he's coming from. All right, I'm going to just reread this. The relation to the commodity is not only visible, but one no longer sees anything but it. The world one sees is its world. Modern economic production extends its dictatorship extensively and intensively. In the least industrialized places, its domination is already present with a few star commodities and as imperialist domination by zones which are ahead in the development of productivity. In these advanced zones, social space is invaded by continuous superimposition of geological layers of commodities. At this point in the second industrial revolution alienated consumption becomes for the masses a supplementary duty to alienated production. It is all the soul labor of a society which globally becomes the total commodity, for which the cycle must be continued. For this to be done, it is necessary for this total commodity to return as a fragment to the fragmented individual, absolutely separated from the productive forces operating as an ensemble. Thus, it is here that the specialized science of domination must in turn specialize. It fragments itself into sociology, psychotechnics, cybernetics, semiology, etc., watching over the self-regulation of all the levels of the process. Hi. Nice. I like it. I hope you're toasty. Can you close the door? Yeah. Whereas in the primitive phase of capitalist accumulation, political economy sees in the proletarian only the worker, who must receive the minimum indispensable for the conservation of his labor power without ever considering him in his leisure, in his humanity. This position of the ideas of the dominant class is reserved as soon as the degree of abundance attained in the production of commodities demands a surplus of collaboration from the worker. This worker, suddenly washed of the total scorn which is clearly shown to him by all the modalities of organization and surveillance of production, finds himself each day outside of production, seemingly treated as a grown-up, with a zealous politeness under the mask of a consumer. I don't know why, but I'm just thinking about Amazon, like packing and shipping centers, and the workers there having their every movement tracked. Then the humanism of the commodity takes charge of the leisure and humanity of the worker, simply because political economy can and must now dominate these spheres as political economy. Thus, the perfected denial of man has taken charge of the totality of human existence. The spectacle is a permanent opium war whose aim is to make acceptable the identification of goods with commodities, and of satisfaction with survival augmenting according to its own laws. But if consumable survival is something which must always increase, this is because it never ceases to contain privation. If there is nothing beyond augmented survival, no point where it might stop its growth, this is because it is not beyond privation, But is privation become enriched? Doesn't feel like the right grammatic form. With automation, which is both the most advanced sector of modern industry and the model where its practice is perfectly summed up, the world of the commodity must surmount the following contradiction. The technical instrumentation, which objectively eliminates labor, must at the same time conserve labor as a commodity and as the only source of the commodity. Now I'm thinking about AI and like the dream of AI. In order for automation or any other less extreme form of increasing the productivity of labor not to diminish the actual social labor, not to diminish the actual social labor necessary for the entire society, new jobs must be created. The tertiary sector, services, represents an immense extension of the continuous rows of the army of distribution and a eulogy of present-day commodities. The tertiary sector is thus a mobilization of supplementary forces which opportunity encounters the necessity for such an organization of rear-guard labor in the very artificiality of the needs for such commodities. Whoa. Guide, I don't know about that. Was a bit of a brain twister there. Okay. Exchange value could originate only as an agent of use value, but its victory by means of its own weapons created the conditions for its autonomous domination. Mobilizing all human use and seizing the monopoly of its satisfaction, exchange value has ended up by directing us. The process of exchange became identified with all possible use and reduced use to the mercy of exchange. Exchange value is the condottiere of use value, which ends up carrying on the war for itself. The tendency of use value to fall, this constant of capitalist economy, develops a new form of privation within augmented survival. The new privation is not liberated to any extent from the old penury, since it requires the participation of most men as wage workers in the endless pursuit of its attainment. And since everyone knows he must submit or die, the reality of this blackmail lies in the fact that use in its most impoverished form, eating, inhabiting, exists only to the extent that it is imprisoned within the illusory wealth of augmented survival. The real basis for the acceptance of illusion in general in consumption of modern commodities. The real consumer becomes a consumer of illusion. The commodity is this factually real illusion, and the spectacle is its general manifestation. Use value, which was implicitly contained in exchange value, must now be explicitly proclaimed in the inverted reality of the spectacle, precisely because its factual reality is eroded by the overdeveloped commodity economy, and because a pseudo-justification becomes necessary for counterfeit life. The spectacle is the other side of money. It is the general abstract equivalent of all commodities. But if money has dominated society as the representation of the central equivalence, namely as the exchangeable property of the various goods whose uses remained incomparable, the spectacle is its developed modern complement, in which the totality of the commodity world appears as a whole, as a general equivalence for what the totality, yes?
So Netflix won't work. Do you think it's because we're on a trip and we didn't download anything?
I think you should look for the Wi-Fi password.
What's the Wi-Fi?
I'll give it to you and you can enter it.
Where do we enter it? Where?
Just give it to Dad.
Can I try blowing out a candle?
Yeah.
Which candles again?
Actually, I need them because they keep mosquitoes away. Love you. I'll come in a little bit. Okay. In which the totality of the commodity world appears as a whole, as a general equivalence for what the totality of the society can be and do. The spectacle is the money which one only looks at, because in the spectacle the totality of use is already exchanged for the totality of abstract representation. The spectacle is not only the servant of pseudo-use, it is already in itself the pseudo-use of life. This might need a second read on my part. At the moment of economic abundance, the concentrated results of social labor becomes visible and subjugates all reality to appearance, which is now its product. Capital is no longer the invisible center which directs the mode of production. Accumulation spreads it to the periphery in the form of tangible objects. The entire expanse of society is its portrait. The victory of the autonomous economy must at the same time be its defeat. The forces which it has unleashed eliminate the economic necessity, which was the immutable basis of earlier societies. When economic necessity is replaced by the necessity for boundless economic development, the satisfaction of primary human needs is replaced by an uninterrupted fabrication of pseudo-needs, which are reduced to the single pseudo-need of maintaining the reign of the autonomous economy. For the autonomous economy separates itself forever from basic need to the extent that it emerges from the social unconscious, which depended on it without knowing it. Okay, and this is a quote related to Freud. So, all that is conscious is used up. That which is unconscious remains unalterable. But once freed, does it not fall to ruins in its turn? I don't know, Freud. I don't have the highest opinions of you. When society discovers that it depends on the economy in effect depends on it. The subterranean power, which has grown to the point of seeming to be sovereign, has lost its power. That which was the economic, it must become the I. The subject can only emerge from society, namely from the struggle within it. The subject's possible existence hangs on the outcome of the class struggle, which shows itself to be the product and the producer of the economic foundation of history. The consciousness of desire and the desire for consciousness are identically the project which, in its negative form, seeks the abolition of classes, that is, the direct possession by the workers over all moments of their activity. Its opposite is the society of the spectacle, where the commodity contemplates itself in a world which it has created. All right, so that's the end of that section. So that was chapter 2, Commodity and the Spectacle. I think that's what this chapter is called. I think it was like, commodity. Let's see. The Commodity as a Spectacle by Guy Dubord. Thank you for joining me again.